Hello, today is Wednesday, September 4th, and we're back. Fault Line's summer hiatus is officially over, which means the crew is all back together for our 355th episode. It's been a while, so in case you've forgotten, we're Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm Jessica Jones, and today I'm joined by Martha Miller, NSI's new Deputy Executive Director, and our two favorite senior fellows, Morgan Bina and Les Munson. So for our first episode back, we thought we'd do a bit of a catch up because even though we've been gone for a couple months, there is still a war in Ukraine. So we're going to chat about a few recent developments. Over the summer, Ukraine actually struck into Russia. It captured dozens of Russian towns and villages, about 460 square miles of Russian territory, and also captured hundreds of Russian soldiers. But it's not all good news for the Ukrainians. Earlier this week, Western donated, long-awaited F-16 crashed. This is one of the F-16s from the first installment of planes to arrive in Ukraine earlier this month. And the pilot killed, Moonfish, was actually one of the few pilots who was trained and able to fly one. Of course, we've been talking about F-16s a lot on this show, and we really thought it would be a much-needed boost to the Ukrainian military efforts. Also, earlier this week, Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Mongolia for a state visit. This took place even though the ICC still has an outstanding arrest warrant out for the Russian president. And Mongolia, as a member of the ICC, was obligated to arrest him. So we're not sure what's going to happen to Mongolia moving forward. So just to kick it off, I'll leave it open to whoever wants to go first. We've got stories about Ukraine moving into Russia, but headlines this week also pointed out that a Russian strike has killed 50 in Ukraine. So was there really a change in the war efforts over the summer? What do we think is happening over there?
I'll jump in. I think this is a big psychological win for the Ukrainians, and it is definitely a blow to Vladimir Putin and probably to the Russian people as well. I think there was definitely a sense that they were impenetrable. And so Ukraine being able to demonstrate that they could cross into Russian territory was actually very important. Coupled with the F-16s, this has an added psychological effect, a positive one. Despite that crash, they still have this capability of using multiple F-16s, and I think that's very important for Ukraine.
Les and Morgan, beyond kind of this confidence and surge of pride that Martha points out, do we think on the military front that the strike into Russia has a significant significance of the F-16s?
Well, I think it is hugely significant. Ukraine went into Russia. Russia's a nuclear power. Ukraine is not. There has been this idea in international affairs that a non-nuclear country cannot really invade a nuclear armed country because of the possible response of using nuclear weapons. That clearly did not happen. So this is in a way a transformative maneuver, and I think it puts the lie to the Biden administration's approach for the last 2.5 years, which has been a very kind of fraidy cat approach to the Russians. Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons, and the administration seems to believe him. But now when the Ukrainians actually put it to the test, it didn't happen. Good for them. It should change the way the White House approaches the Ukraine war. But let's be realistic here. The stuff that the Ukrainians gained is not strategically significant. It is emotionally and psychologically significant, which is a big deal. And perhaps it could lead to discussions to end this war and to have Russian forces retreat and Ukrainian forces retreat, and for there to be peace. That would be a good thing. I think we're a little bit a ways away from that at this point, but it's a big deal, and hopefully the administration can use it to end this thing.
Morgan is our favorite ICC commentator. What do you think about Putin's visit to Mongolia?
Sure. Well, first, I'll just say that I agree with everything Martha and Les have said. As Les pointed out earlier this morning offline, the United States, the administration is reconsidering sending long-range cruise missiles to the Ukrainians. Again, this is going to take several months. It's really going to force Russia into a defensive position if this goes through. But we're 3 years into this war, and we're now just giving the Ukrainians the tools to win here. It took 6 months for these Ukrainians to train up on the F-16s when it should normally take a year. So again, I mean, we're behind the curve. Ukraine is slowly making progress in terms of getting the weapons it needs to defend itself. But again, I think that the question is it enough at this point? Is that going to really make a difference? Specifically on Mongolia, like Mongolia is a party to the Rome Statute. Putin has traveled before, but he traveled to North Korea. North Korea is not a party to the Rome Statute. So I think obviously what we're seeing here with Mongolia is that this really does set a precedent of Putin traveling to state party countries where he's not being held to account. Right. And this really does set a precedent and open the door for other countries to do the same. I'll note that there are a number of former Soviet Union countries that are not party to the Rome Statute, whether it be Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, Belarus. There are a lot of opportunities for Putin to travel within the region and not be arrested. But I think Mongolia is significant. It does depend on Russia for a lot of its energy. And so I don't think it's much of a surprise that Putin wasn't arrested, but nevertheless does set a concerning precedent.
Jones, let me just jump in here and maybe pivot off of what Morgan was saying and say, for those folks who are thinking we can rely on international law to resolve major disputes in the world, this shows that is really not a good approach. It doesn't work. It's fine to have these statutes, but if you expect them to actually change the behavior of global powers when it comes to their interests, it's not going to happen. And so I think it goes to the White House and their approach to the region, where they've been on the one hand, trying to hold back Ukraine from being too aggressive against the Russians, and also kind of reliant on this concept of international law and international agreements as somehow constraining Russian behavior. Neither one of those is a good approach. It's time for fresh thinking.
Can you imagine the headlines, though, if Putin had been arrested by Mongolian law enforcement? That we would have had to do a special episode on that one. Last question. I think there have been some recent headlines about rumors that the administration might push for more Ukraine aid in this Congress as we head into an election year. Do we think there's going to be? There's a lot of things that Congress needs to work on this fall, right? So, do we think Congress there's going to be any movement at all, or is that just something? I mean, as we focus maybe on the debt, other things. No traction. What do you guys think?
Well, there has been discussion of a supplemental. I think we saw a particular imbalance when it came to the House and the Senate NDAA numbers. There has been discussion of a supplemental. I think many in the defense community and frankly the Ukrainians and the Israelis, for that matter, would really welcome that. But I think it's too early to sort of predict whether or not that will happen. Obviously, the November election is going to play a huge role in whether or not that is even considered. So I think right now, at least, we're in a bit of a holding pattern. Congress is going to move fast and furious in September to try to pass a CR. To ensure that the federal government is funded for until we'll see when.
Yeah, I was like, how long?
But then, of course, their Congress is out of session all of October until the elections. So we've got some time to sort of figure out whether or not those funding levels are going to go up.
All right. Thank you. That's a wrap. Welcome back to the group off of our summer break. Thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Ann Long, Klong Jennings, and the entire NSI team for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Friday, September 6th. Maybe a fun Friday episode, who knows, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check us out there. I'm wearing our latest Fault Lines swag item, a nice fleece, because we're heading into fall, guys. Those pumpkin lattes are coming soon. So check out our channel and a video of today's episode. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.